Come on, mothers, let's go down, down in the river to pray.
Very early in my life, I thought I would be a minister. The minister in our part of the world, they're more important than the president of the United States. The minister, it really is the shaman of our tribes.
The church was like family. It was the community, and it was the people we knew.
The idea of a benevolent being was very close to my heart.
I liked the thought of being a career that would be helpful to people. You get to do that as a pastor. You get to walk with people through difficult times of life and fun times of life.
I thought I was called to be a soldier in the front line of the army of Christ, to go out and to win the whole world for Jesus.
At the age of 18, I had decided that I wanted to become a nun.
I was your classic new convert, excited for Jesus person.
You know, the first thing that comes to mind when I think why this particular career path is I desperately wanted to believe. I needed to believe.
So what do you do if you're still a minister, but you don't believe in God?
I am a senior pastor in a small-town church. I grew up in a preacher's home. I think I've had doubts all of my life, to tell you the truth, and I've ignored them all of my life. I thought they were demons that were oppressing me, and I thought, well, I just don't believe enough. I don't have enough faith. I'm not trying hard enough. There was a point where I was sitting on the back porch, and it was sunny, and I was dreading going to church, putting my thoughts together for a sermon. And suddenly I realized, I don't believe any of this. I've done the praying, I've done the bowing, I've done the kneeling, I've done the laying flat on the floor in my face, begging for some help, begging for some sense of the presence that I was told would be there if I just had enough faith for it. And it's never been there. And I thought, you know, I'm fixing to be 54 years old, and that is long enough.
I've been in the church in some form or fashion for about 30 years. I come from a very conservative part of this country. The Bible Belt. Most people understand that terminology. Churches, I couldn't begin to guess how many. On every street corner? Would that be a good answer? Lots of churches. All kinds of churches. I always believed that if I was strong in my faith, if I prayed hard enough, if I sincerely trusted God, then God would take care of me. Kierkegaard said faith is a leap into the dark. Leaping into the dark for me meant giving up the God of the gaps. The notion of not believing, I see it happening very incrementally. For me, it was like a huge puzzle, but almost in reverse. Dislodging and repairing, taking apart and reinventing, it was a work in progress.
So I'm a professional pastor who is a closeted atheist. I'll come here to write my thoughts. Maybe this will help me. Maybe this will help someone else. But I just started this, so this is all I got for right now. My name is Brendan Murphy, and I am a pastor.
My name is Jen Murphy, and I am a stay-at-home mom.
I was raised both secularly and in a Jewish, religious, but more cultural context. And when I was in high school, I had a cute girl that I had a crush on and invited me to go to church once. So there was a point where we were supposed to go off in our quiet times and just have a conversation with God. And so I said, okay, God, what should I do about this girl? Like, I was really, I had nothing else on my mind at all. And what was strange is in that moment, I felt like I received an answer. I was through the roof, spiritually speaking.
My background is a little intense. It's not the normal kid's background by any means. My mother would do drugs, and my dad was a local dealer for one of the big gangs where I grew up. And he told me that I needed God, and he threw me out of the house and told me that I couldn't come back inside until I went to church on a Sunday. So, Sunday morning, I went to church, and I spent every day at church. I would get home from school, and I would walk around the corner to see if anybody was in the parking lot. I was always there.
And when I was in college, we ended up joining a club called Campus Crusade for Christ, and they unleashed us out onto the streets, and we went door to door. And at one point in time, I was talking to somebody, and they wanted to become a Christian. Like, they went from random person to, please, can you pray with me to become a Christian? And I thought that was just the most amazing thing in the world. In a matter of 2 years, I went from nobody and no friends to being a leader. And the way that that changes you on the inside is huge. And then everyone else is telling you that you should be a pastor. You know, hey, you should preach. And so I took a deep breath, and I took a single class at seminary the semester after I graduated from my bachelor's. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was the most intellectually stimulating thing in my life.
The church was my safety. You know, if I'm in this church building, then nothing can happen to me. And I did everything. Everything was church. It was the only thing that I ever had. No one really wants to be a friend with the girl that has a dad who's, you know, selling drugs out of their garage. You know, any good parent would keep your child away from that person, even though it's not the girl that's doing it, but it's the atmosphere. And so I would, everything. Church was everything, is everything.
I spent my entire adult life as a Christian. A lot of people will ask me what changed. A lot of people will say, well, what happened? Nothing happened. One of the ways I describe my loss of faith is it was a death by 1,000 cuts.
I contacted Dan Dennett after reading an essay that he wrote about Mother Teresa losing her faith. I was interested that this happened with clergy because I had been thinking the same thing.
Linda Lascola came to me with the suggestion that certainly there must be pastors out there, preachers as well, who have the same views if we can find them and interview them confidentially. And she was right. And we got a small research grant to do this as a research project through Tufts.
And they called me up because they know that, having been a former minister myself, I know a lot of others. And when my book Godless came out in 2006, I started getting a lot of emails from former clergy and current clergy. Emails from people saying, I'm still in the pulpit and I read your book and it's great, don't tell anybody. You know, it's kind of cool. So I was able to give Dan and Linda, I don't know, 5 or 8 names of people that I knew about.
I think clergy are in an importantly different group from regular parishioners who lose faith. Many preachers, pastors, priests are trapped in their congregations, and they haven't anybody to talk to until now. Nobody knows how large that group is.
They lost their faith based on gathering more information and thinking about things more. Sometimes it was science reading, sometimes it was religion reading, and sometimes we're just, looking over the Bible again and being influenced by their own experience as a pastor, dealing with the everyday life of a pastor.
Like, I didn't choose to be an atheist. I didn't wake up one day and be like, gee, wouldn't it be great to ruin my life? Like, nobody does that. You have prayer times at church, and people say, hey, can you pray for me? And you're like, sure, yeah, I'll pray for you. Well, what do you want to pray about? And they'll say, well, I'm driving to Las Vegas. And so can you pray for our trip? And it's like, yeah, sure, I'll pray for you on the way to Sin City. Obviously, awesome. And I remember I've been following the Arab Spring since it started. And a while ago, I remember seeing pictures of children that had been gassed by sarin gas by the Assad forces. And it just seemed so stupid, prayer. Why would God listen to your prayer about your road trip? Like, why even waste my time? Because God doesn't listen to the prayers of parents in Syria. And then after that, that's when more questions start flooding in. And then the stuff that your cognitive dissonance has been really great at smoothing over just becomes painfully clear. And then when you stop coming up with answers, questions multiply. It's like whack-a-mole, you know, that stupid game where you hit one down and two more pop up. I would believe it all again if God would just help. Anything.
It's not the easiest thing to sit next to your best friend and your husband and hear him say all of these things about how he feels about his no longer faith. It's the most difficult thing. You know, Sunday mornings are horrible. If I can find an excuse to be in the kitchen, in the nursery, anywhere but having to listen to the sermon, I would rather do that. I do pray, but this just makes it even harder. I mean, what kind of God would kill a child and give him cancer? That's just a horrible thing to think about. It just seems so wrong to second guess it, to second guess any of it, but here I sit and I have to deal with it every day. Every day.
Once you realize that you really no longer believe the supernatural doctrines of your denomination or your religion, once you realize that, you're very isolated. And there's very few people you can admit that to. I was very careful about expressing the changes that were taking place in my own mind. I was very cautious about who I shared a new idea with or new concept with. I was very cautious with how I worded things.
It struck Linda and me immediately once we started doing the interviews that these people were like gays in the 50s. They had no idea how many they were, and they didn't dare find out.
Nobody knows how many are non-believers. How would you do a poll? Who would respond to such a poll?
When I first came to the conclusion that I couldn't be a Christian, you know, it didn't necessarily mean I was an atheist at the time, but I just realized that I couldn't be a Christian anymore. Being a pastor, that's an instant threat to your welfare. Pastor is a weird job. It's one of the jobs where it's not even just your job, it is you. You are a pastor. What does it mean to be a pastor if you don't even believe anymore?
My counselor, she says you need to make this transition as soon as you can. She says otherwise, unconsciously, you're going to do it anyway. You're going to let it all out, and it won't be pretty. My walls are coming down. I have to have them come down. I don't think I can live like this much longer.
The question of integrity and how much can I have right now in this job is one that bugs me a lot. But the thing I care about above all is my 5-year-old son and my 2-year-old son and my wife of 10 years. And I cannot all of a sudden get foreclosed upon or have a hard time going to the grocery store because we can't afford it. And so I'm going to do the job to the best of my ability, give people what they are expecting to receive, try not to harm anybody in the process, and try to get another job as fast as possible that'll actually pay the bills that's not minimum wage.
It's hard. I have to search very quietly. As many people do when they're searching for a job, they don't want to tell their present employers. I can't tell any of the people that would normally be my contacts that I'm out there looking for work. And so I'm going out cold, applying for jobs with people who don't know me and I don't know them. So how's it going? Slow.
How's the job hunt going? It sucks. I just got a rejection letter yesterday. That's fun. At least they sent me a letter. You know, I'll be honest, I didn't look for jobs right away because we still had to process who we were as people. And I was just reading the other day about a guy in my shoes that just got served divorce papers. And when you're a closeted atheist as a pastor, for me, that was like my number one fear. It's like, I just lost God. I don't need to lose my family, because who am I if I lose my family? And you literally just shudder in fear. And these guys come out of it. You know, there's always a better day tomorrow for these guys. Divorce isn't the end of the world. But for me, it felt like it would have been. Because you've always been my best friend. And I've always loved you. Since the first days that we met. And I think I am just so lucky that with everything that I'm going through, I've got you.
On camera?
On camera, even.
You dirty bird.
The immediate fallout was that I felt like I had no community. The place that I went for consolation, for friendship, it evaporated. I joined a local humanist group and I went to my first meetup. And at that meetup, they were playing a video of Daniel Dennett in Montreal. At one point in the presentation, he just made a remark, just a slight one, about a study about preachers that are not believers. And I nearly fell out of my chair. I was so shocked. I was like, what? There are people out there like me that know what this is like, that have lost their faith. I ran home. I looked up Dan Dennett. I looked up some info on Linda Lascola. I fired off an email and I said, I think this is me. Hi, are you doing another study?
What does a pastor do, or a nun or a priest do after they leave the ministry? Who's listening to them?
I have great sympathy for clergy people who lose their faith. They are in a very, very difficult situation. I wanted, right from the start of the Richard Dawkins Foundation, to see if we could do something to help them.
Richard Dawkins says, you know what, wouldn't it be great to do something for these clergy that are trapped? And it was just an offhand remark, kind of like, what could we do? The Richard Dawkins Foundation for Reason and Science.
My original plan was more ambitious. I thought to myself, what if the foundation really got a lot of money? Bill Gates type money. What would we spend it on? And one thing that I thought of was retraining scholarships for clergy people.
Richard Dawkins and I talked about this, and we were advised by some people in the field that if you actually made that promise, you'd have 10,000 applicants the next day.
We did provide a website, a friendly place where they could go and talk to each other. Was the next best thing, was what we could afford to do from the sort of money that we could raise. So that was sort of the early conception of the Clergy Project.
Linda, I think, called me and told me that there was going to be this group, it was going to be a private forum, and I was going to get an invitation to go. And so that's how it happened. I was one of the founding clergy members of the Clergy Project. We started with 52. We have over 600, and we have members from pretty much every country around the world. And we have representation from all the major religions.
I'm very encouraged by the sheer number of people in the Clergy Project. I think everything's moving in the right direction.
I heard a program on the Clergy Project. I connected with them and became a member, and then more recently, Catherine invited me to come onto the board. There's that kind of silence amongst clergy. They don't want anyone to know that they don't believe, and so they're very isolated. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to be in the Clergy Project, because I want people to recognize that there are other options. It's a long road, and it's a hard road, but it's a road.
I was within the, I guess the first 50 or so people associated with the Clergy Project before it was really formalized. I began to communicate with other ministers like myself, and the very first benefit of those communications was that I realized I wasn't crazy and that I wasn't performing some crazy ritual of self-sabotage, intentionally destroying my life. And so that network was life-saving.
Pastors' wives are kind of put on a pedestal, and they have to act a certain way, and they have to dress a certain way, and they have to talk a certain way. I'm the pastor's wife. I'm not just Jen, and I've been trying to be really strong because my 5-year-old can see when I'm upset, and he reacts to me being upset, and so I have to be strong. I have to be strong when I'm at church. I have to be strong when I'm at the grocery store. I have to put on the show. I have to lie to everybody I know. I went on a mom's night out with 3 friends. And I just lost it. I made the statement that my husband is an atheist. And then this one girl that I've known for almost 3 years now, she has been my worst nightmare. She has called me a non-Christian, and I'm a horrible person, and I am not doing the right thing, because the right thing would be walking into our church and telling them that my husband doesn't believe and that he has to step down. I'm begging her to just be my friend, and she gives me the Christianese of God is first. I can't put you in front of what God says to do, and I have lost sleep over it. Everything that I've been taught about my faith is that God wants us to love our neighbors as ourselves. He wants us to have compassion and understanding, and this woman did none of it.
It's going to be a huge punch in the gut for the church. This ruins our plans because I don't have as much time to find an appropriate job. I just have to find a job, which makes her feel better as a person, I suppose, but it kind of ruins us.
We certainly know examples of pastors who have been finally decided to come clean and be candid and tell their congregations. It's a terrible shock, and they are basically run out of town. The consequences can be very severe.
With clergy, they're losing everything. They're losing their job, they're losing their livelihood, they're in many cases losing their friends and their family, more so than people who are not clergy.
I didn't know how much damage was going to be created within our lives, right off the bat. I could see the collateral damage was building up, but I thought I could manage it. I thought I could keep all the pieces together. I stepped forward and committed identity suicide. I'd already lost my secular job, once people found out about my situation. We were already in financial trouble because I'd left the last church that I'd pastored. I had no idea that my wife would leave, so eventually the pressure from the community, the whole situation became unbearable for her because she's a very private person. And so eventually she left, and so it left just me and my son sitting in this house that we had fought to try to save.
The church owns the house that I live in, a manse. That's where I am now, and that's where I'll stay for a little while. If they found out fully the things that I've been thinking, and they found out about the interviews I've been having with you, I'd be out on the curb.
I told my mother around the time that I got married that I wasn't a believer anymore, but it didn't really sink in. It was only more recently that it was very clearly made to her that I am an atheist, that I've been working with the Clergy Project, that I'm writing a book, that I am out there as an atheist. And that conversation didn't go very well. We're not speaking anymore because of it. And that's the unfortunate reality that people face when they transition out of faith. It's something I feel really sad about for my mom because she's denying herself an opportunity to be with us because her religion is erecting a barrier, an invisible, non-existent barrier.
I finally told my wife. It took a long time. I ended up telling her younger son first. It just sort of came out. And then I told her other child, and then I told my wife. And it turned out she was a little relieved because she knew I was hiding something, but didn't know what it was.
My daughter knows, and my wife knows. So other than my friend, my wife, and my daughter, no one else knows.
I don't know if there's a way to predict in advance how your friends and relatives are going to react to it. There's just no way. And I've heard other stories of other clergy who were scared to death to tell one of their relatives. But when they did, the son or the daughter said, "Yeah, me too." So you just don't know. It's kind of scary to come out and be open about this in that kind of a community.
There's been a lot that's happened in a month, and it's not been good. So Jen told somebody that she thought she can trust. And so she started telling people. She sent a text message to a lady and says, "Hey, is Brendan still preaching?" And the lady said, "Well, yeah, of course he is." And, "Oh, well, he's an atheist." Like, over text message. Like, I definitely wanted to be a lot more controlled about how I came out, about leaving the church, about telling and connecting with people. And now it's being pushed forward because of this woman. It's infuriating. And I've been applying all the time. to other jobs, and it's just been utterly depressive. We have one of the premier Bible software companies, and my buddy, who's an ex-pastor, he's an atheist, he works there, and he's like, you'd be great at sales, man. And so I had the outbound sales manager call me, and he got back to me that he was not going to interview me at the time because I don't have sales experience. I was like, who's got more experience than me in what you're selling? It just blows my mind. It's just like I couldn't even get an interview selling Bible software to pastors. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I qualified to do? So today is a board meeting, and it's a regularly scheduled board meeting. I fully expect them to ask me to resign. If it goes to a vote to the congregation as to what to do with me, I mean, that's just gonna tear the church apart. Jen is not handling the pressure very well. And then so she's losing sleep at night, and then she's worrying about her husband, and then she's worrying about her children, and then she's wondering, is God there listening to her? It's hard to watch her go through that. I didn't want her to. I really didn't want to force her through this, but she's not mad at me. She doesn't blame me. She loves me. So I think give us a year, and I think we'll find what normal is, and it'll be good, and we'll go from there.
I think one of the weird things is I get a lot of ministers that write to me. They're still in, you know, and they're like, can you help me? Or that are coming out. And so often they say to me, now that I don't believe in heaven and hell and eternal rewards and stuff, nothing seems meaningful to me. Like, life seems meaningless. You realize how addicted that they were to, like, that weird narrative. When these guys come to me and say, like, without heaven and without hell, what's the point of anything? And I go, like, yeah, that's why this moment is so important.
Atheists don't need church. They don't. They do need community. And I think that's the piece that they need. A colleague of mine had a tragic accident involving his son, and his son was killed. The newspapers the next day had a picture of a family with a young child, and the headlines were something like, God took care of our family. And that was the straw, really, that broke the camel's back. One Sunday, when I didn't have a sermon, I mean, I'd had a busy week, didn't have a sermon, got up and just preached a sermon about how I didn't believe in that kind of God. I didn't believe in a God that was going to punish people, and I certainly didn't believe in a God that was going to save one child and let another child perish for whatever reason, certainly not to strengthen someone, to teach them a lesson. I thought that was abominable. That was really the beginning of it, and that sermon was traumatic for me and for the congregation. I hadn't intended to say any of that. Like, I'm an out atheist in the pulpit.
I've only been here a couple of months, and I happened to write an article for the Friendly Atheist magazine that ended up being titled, I'm a Presbyterian minister who doesn't believe in God. When that article got picked up by a lot of Christian media, suddenly we had protesters at the church the next day yelling at my parishioners, your minister doesn't believe in God. And so that was like, well, I'm kind of out. So I dealt with them, you know, I just said, this is what happens.
Here at West Hill, like, not everybody here is an atheist. There's a lot of traditional believers here who continue to have a relationship with this congregation because they always have, and so they've transitioned with us. So it's a with or without God congregation. They have regularly gone back to that question, what do we do now? Is this the direction we want to keep going? And what happens if Greta is stripped of her designation as a minister within the United Church of Canada? There was a motion made to set up a hearing into my beliefs 10 years ago this year. And that motion was shot down by a margin of 3 votes, which was a bit frightening.
I think I lost a couple. Many are still showing up, and more are showing up. So people who are interested in exploring those questions about what does God mean when God is no longer a supernatural being.
In the beginning, when Brendan told me that this was going to happen, he had told me that it was going to be a long process, that he was going to take his time, that he wanted a job, and I didn't foresee it being so quick.
I walked in this past Thursday night, and they had already pre-written a resignation letter for me, and they had a severance package offered.
When we first talked, I was very much in tune with, no, I still love God, I still want to do all of this, just have to figure out how to do it now. I feel like I lost the communication that I thought I had with God. I am in this whirlwind free fall, and I still don't know. I still don't know. And it's terrifying. My stomach is in knots all the time. Then there are those days where you just stare off into oblivion, and you don't really have anything to say. You're not really thinking, but you're just staring. I have a lot of those days.
I didn't need to go to church this morning, but I did. And part of me was doing it so that they don't feel guilty that I'm leaving. Because oftentimes a congregation will be upset when a pastor leaves, like they wish they could have done something.
Today there was sadness, and I really think true sadness. You know, I had someone give me the ultimate Christianese statement of telling me that right now you're in the valley of the shadow of death, and God will rise you up, and you will be closer to him than you've ever been. And I just kind of laughed, like inside, just like, really? I'll pray for you. Thanks. I coming quickly to the conclusion that Christians are the worst people I've ever met. It shouldn't be that way. And they're mean, and they're hateful, and they don't do what the Bible says anyways, you know? But because my husband is having a hard time with faith and has admitted that he's having a hard time with faith, well, he's just not all in. He didn't give his all to Christ. Well, it's not true.
Then the question became, what do you do now? And over again, people would say to me, listen, I don't believe in God either, but I miss church. I miss the singing. I miss raising my kids with other families that share the same values. I miss the pastoral care. I miss knowing, like, when I'm in the hospital, that somebody will come and visit me. There are a bunch of people trying to figure out what community looks like on the other side of faith.
Each week at this time, we do something called a community moment. Sometimes it's the story of your journey to free thought. Sometimes it's an idea from a book you've read, a movie you've seen. You know, we're all about bringing a diversity of voices to the table each week. My friend Gary and I were having lunch together, and we started bouncing this idea around of how do we form a dogma-free community. And then we started sharing the idea with others who were also excited about it. We formed a group of people who are interested in developing, experimenting with a new kind of community that was based on, we said, reason and compassion, celebrating the human experience, but just without the dogma. Our first week, we had 25 people, and we were ecstatic. Now we have over 125 each week, and new Oasis communities are launching around the country. So we feel like it's something that's resonating with people. You know, it's exciting to see new secular communities developing around the country. Not just Oasis or Sunday Assembly and other models for secular community.
Hello, everybody. When I was 11, I had my first ever crush, and it was on Jesus. And but like many crushes, it sort of fizzled out, and then really hating him. Couldn't believe I ever loved him anyway.
I was a Christian till I was about 17, and I was very involved in the church. And then when I stopped believing in God, I left the church, obviously, because I felt like I couldn't stay there anymore. When I sort of thought about it, I realised I didn't miss God, I missed church. And I really wondered, is there a way to get these things, the community, the self-improvement, the charity, without this little God bit, which is the bit that I can't agree with. Fast forward, 10 years or something. One of us said, I've always thought about starting a church without the God bit. And then the other one said, me too. We're like, yeah, let's do it. And then a bit like when you say to someone, let's go jogging together, it means you have to turn up.
Yeah.
So I think because there were two of us, that meant we could help each other to get it done.
I think the concept of secular community, although it has a lot of similarities to religion, it's also a new concept. We don't exist to be anti-religious. That's another misconception people have about what we do. They think, oh, you're an atheist church and you sit around on Sunday and you bash religion. Well, no, we have bigger fish to fry. We're gonna celebrate life, and we're gonna learn about literature and art and science, and we surprisingly don't spend a lot of time talking about religion because we're not an atheist church.
When we first got going, there were just the two of us. Then we're like, okay, there's got to be 5. And then now we're giving advice, trying to get 10 people because it's such a big job. But it was just us meeting up, trying to pull in different things, trying to find the venue. But the crazy thing was that the first time it happened, there were almost 200 people there. But it just gave it this momentum, and within a week of us getting the attention, we went, and if you want to start your own, just get in touch.
So, there's all these people starting Sunday assemblies around the world who'd never been to one, didn't know what it was. I mean, how would you start something you've never been to? Crazy. So then Sanderson went and visited. I happened to be going to Melbourne for a comedy festival, so I started the one in Melbourne. It was just a kind of this crazy journey that we didn't know we were going on.
That first year was absolutely
nuts.
Mental.
We have Houston Oasis, Kansas City Oasis was the next one. Greater Boston Oasis launched a few weeks ago. We have several more in the pipeline right now. And I've had several people come up to me and say, Mike, I've made more friends in the last 3 years than I've made in my entire adult life. And that's thrilling.
What we're trying to do is foster community. If you invest in Sunday Assembly with your time and your energy and your emotions, you can get so much out of it.
It's a celebration of life. We really want to help people just to celebrate this fragile body and existence that you have for a bit, which can be challenging, but also can give you so much. It's really all that you've got.
So what I'd love is just anyone who feels lost and alone and unable to find that community in there, particularly people who've left religious community and stuff, they feel aimless and wandering, that they can wander into a Sunday assembly and find what they're looking for.
Suddenly I was organizing something bigger than myself, something that was helping change other people's lives.
And a Sunday assembly provides a great opportunity for a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds, and it gives us all a chance to just be who we are.
It's often said that before you die, your life passes before your eyes. It is in fact true. It's called living. And it's really easy to look at the funny talks and the pop songs and go, oh yeah, there's some funny talks and pop songs, people, but actually there's something which could be done which we really hope makes a profound impact on the world. And it just so happens that we can do it with flash dance.
Is there anything I miss about being a believer? I would say it depends on what day of the week it is. Some days, there are a few things that I miss. Then on other days, I miss almost everything about it because this is how I grew up. I miss being completely integrated into my hometown. I miss it horribly. I don't enjoy being a stranger in my own town. And so I miss the given connection that comes from being a believer.
When we got home, everything got silent. No one talked to me. There was no phone calls, no Facebook messages, no anything. Brennan has the kindest heart. I'm trying to talk to him hey, no one's called us. These people that said that they were gonna be there for us aren't calling us. They're not stopping by, nothing.
So I actually got on the phone and started sending text messages to everybody. And I didn't tell Jen. I was like, hey, can you call my wife to see how she's doing? She's very alone. I saw Jen on the phone a couple days later talking to everybody. And so I thought that they had said, oh, well, Brendan's reaching out, so we probably want, them to talk to Jen. And no, Jen called them. She had to call her best friends from church to to have somebody to talk to. And none of those conversations went well.
And so I called the circle of friends, each one, called straight down the line. One friend questioned how I'm gonna raise my children. How can I raise my children if I don't have faith? And they didn't know if they could even have a play date because I'm gonna raise my children horribly. I had another friend tell me, because I didn't tell her in the beginning that I don't trust you anymore. And she said, well, we sat at your table for Easter and you had the audacity to let him pray. At Easter, I had no clue. None. So you're yelling at me and you're angry with me, and I had no clue. My faith, my ethics, my morals, the whole kit and caboodle, everything is being thrown out there and questioned. My view of Christianity is you love your Lord, your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and you love your neighbor as yourself.
I really need to emphasize that it wasn't everyone at church that acted like this. Some people did call and check in on us, which we're grateful for, but they weren't our peers. They weren't the people that sat in my house to have Easter, and they weren't the people that we sat in their house for Christmas.
Brendan gets a phone call from a guy who's also in the circle of our friends, and then he gets friend dumped. He combined them, frumped. He got frumped.
I went to meet a friend that was breaking up with me as a friend because I don't believe anymore. I remember just asking him, I was like, why my wife? I mean, I can understand everyone being mad at me. What's wrong with her? What did she do? If I had committed adultery and I cheated on her, would not every woman in the church have surrounded her and felt bad for her and coached her through this? Why is this worse? And he looked me in the eye and he says, of course it's worse. I was like, what? What do you mean, of course it's worse? He's like, yeah, it's infinitely worse, infinitely worse.
It would have been better if he had an affair or committed a felony than lose his faith. And if he would have had an affair or committed a felony, they would be by my side and being my friends. But because this is like the worst thing ever, then no, they're out.
And it's kind of been a tragically beneficial thing for us. But because of either the neglect or the rejection, that's actually driven us together. She knew that I wasn't the wrong one, that I was the right one, and that they were the broken people. And I never told her this, I never tried to convince her of this, but they did my job for me. The church's reaction to my wife did my job for me and helped my marriage by being judgmental or neglectful and angry people.
There's two things in the United States that people associate with atheists. Number one, they're immoral. Number two, they're unpatriotic. How can they be good people if they don't think there's an invisible magic deity watching them? You know, particularly in the wake of the Cold War, this notion that America's God's country, you know, the communists were atheists and godless, and we were Americans, and we had God on our side, and this is when we added "In God We Trust" to our money. Survey after survey shows that atheists come in last place when it comes to, they're the least liked or the least respected group in America. I don't think atheists have experienced the kind of persecution and violence that homosexuals have in this country, but the stigma, at least in our political halls, is worse for atheists than for homosexuals.
People are critical, saying, you know, an apostate and messing everything up because they think religion is about believing in things. I think it's about engaging with reality as it is. And we need that because so much of life is denial of reality or a fear of reality. And what better place for a community to get together and to talk about what's really real. I suppose I could lose my job, but no one's ever done that yet, and they've been threatening to charge me for 10 years, and it hasn't happened, so.
In April of 2015, we were advised that there have been some concerns raised about my leadership in the United Church of Canada. We're not really sure why now. It may be because we started to use the word atheist. I'm in conversation with my congregation all the time about what I will do, and we're trying to sort that out. It is a long process. It is pretty much up in the air for me. So the question, I guess, at this point is, do we still see ourselves as members of the United Church? I don't consider the Bible the authoritative document. I have always thought that love was the authoritative text. If the United Church of Canada is going to argue that the Bible requires that love be subordinate to it, I have a very big problem with that, and I think that the people in my congregation would have a big problem with that too.
I think most people, when they're in community and relationships or social beings, are probably going to be healthier emotionally than if we're isolated.
My name is Jerry DeWitt. I got saved at a camp meeting that was hosted by Jimmy Swagger. Thank you. The joke I always make is, where the hell were y'all back then? I've done numerous conferences like this one over the last 4 years now. It's wonderful to get to see the folks, and you get to see a lot of the same folks over and over again. This is, kind of now what we do, and you just love them. They're family now. After 4 years, it's family.
I'm on a panel with fellow Clergy Project member Jerry DeWitt. I think that these secular conferences are kind of like revivals of sorts for the atheist community. I know that, some people might think that's kind of silly, but, we're communal creatures and we need community.
I can be honest and say I don't know where I'm going. There's an interesting set of obstacles that I did not know that I was going to encounter emotionally, psychologically, when I came into the secular movement, because the entire subject was forced. We've worked very, very hard. We'll be coming out of our bankruptcy in about half the time that we thought, and my relationship with my wife is reestablished. We're together. We just celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary. And so almost everything that it looked like we were going to completely lose, we've been able to salvage and thrive through.
It was tough trying to figure out what I even wanted to do when I left the church. One of my friends from church, he said there was a sales position opening in his company and he'd put in a good word for me. And so I got a job selling security systems. I can actually make money now. That's a weird concept. You mean if I work and then work hard, I can earn a living? Wow,
In the beginning, when all of this started, I was really scared. I still wanted to go to church. I wanted to be involved. I wanted to take our boys to the church kids programs at night. I didn't want God not to be there. Do I still believe in my heart of hearts? I don't know. And I have to keep telling people it's not because of Brendan. I have a brain. I can make decisions for myself. And right now, if he is really up there, or wherever he may be, he is the meanest person I have ever met. And I can't talk to him right now. I can't talk to him. I can't think about him. And all I do is say that he's an asshole. If he's supposed to be the father of lights and all of this great, wonderful, positive stuff, I'm not seeing it. At least not from the Christian community.
One of the really striking features of our interviews is how often the people we're interviewing express the joy, the freedom that they feel when they admit to themselves that they no longer believe. Now, they're still not free. Now they feel the bonds of their position, but they have an inner freedom that has been missing in their lives, and their expression of joy and relief at this newfound freedom is really very moving to me.
And the minute I said, I don't believe, I was immediately relieved. Like a pressure had been let off, and a sense of possibility came over me.
I have an opportunity at the end of the year to get involved in some post-traumatic stress disorder counseling. I think I'm going to get out of the church while I'm still able and have energy and proactivity. I better do it before I commit some kind of professional suicide. I hope I can move toward being true to myself and more authentic than I am. I don't know what it's going to look like. I won't know till I make the leap. It's a leap of faith.
I'm still where I am. I'll be here for at least another year. Then the other event that is happening is my wife is going to move out, and we're going to be separated. It's been a long time coming, and it's something I'd like to get past first before I start thinking of a career move. That's kind of where I am.
I still really cared about these people, the people that were not being our friends. And I still was in pastor mode. We need to reach out, we need to forgive, 7 times 77 or whatever it is. So Jen and I had this kind of ongoing battle on the mirror. She wrote this thing on the mirror and it said, people that matter. Number 1, Brendan. Number 2, my kids. Number 3, my family. Number 4, friends who are actually stepping up. And then she wrote underneath that, everyone else can suck it. I saw that on the mirror, and I took the pen, and I put a slash next to Brendan, and I wrote her name, Jen. People that matter. Brendan, Jen, kids, family, friends that are actually being our friends. And it's okay for me to say that. Like, I don't have to feel guilty about that anymore. And it was awesome. Drop the white card.
These Sundays are different. I get to cook, which I absolutely love to do. We have a good time. And I didn't have that before. I mean, we would have a good time. My joke with Brendan was always that I'd ask him, did you have fun? And he said, it was all right. Like, he hardly ever used fun. He says fun now.
Through the heartache of losing most of your friends, Jen and I have been really close and really patient and really kind to each other. Our boys are our life. I think the future for us is, work your ass off and love each other deeply. And I think we could do that. And everyone else can suck it.
Lutherans have liturgies, Calvinists have creeds, Muslims have their minarets, Catholics have their beads, Methodists have methods, holy truth to ascertain, but poor little me, I only have a brain.